Welcome back to another Raidercast adventure into gaming history. Today, I'm joined by a fan legend in her own right. She's been the voice of Lara to countless fan projects, penned many pieces of fan fiction, and is the mind behind both the sublime Angel of Darkness novel and its superb audio drama rendition. I'm talking, of course, about the one and only Jennifer Milward. So Jenny, welcome to Raidercast.
Oh, it's very happy to be here, Chris. Really excited to be part of this podcast because I've heard the first episode and really enjoyed it and can't wait to hear more. So
wonderful. Well, we are all the better for having you on. In this episode, we're going to be talking a bit about yourself and how the series has inspired you. Then we can dive into some exciting Egyptian mythology, if that sounds good.
Yeah. Oh, that's the exciting bit, you see. That's the bit I'm looking forward to the most because this is one of my huge passions.
Tell us a little bit about your Raider journey. How did you first come across Lara and Tomb Raider?
My Tomb Raider journey actually starts back in 1999. We'd seen Tomb Raider here and there about on advertising, and to be perfectly honest, anybody who's known anything about being in the late 90s knows that Lara Croft was kind of anywhere and everywhere in every capacity.
She was a big deal.
Oh, God. It was like everywhere you looked. She was on Lucozade bottles. She was on magazine covers. You couldn't go anywhere without her face looking back at you. But the interesting thing is that I was really put off by an awful lot of the advertising and the marketing for the game. I didn't own a PlayStation. I've never owned a console. So I was sort of missing out on the gaming side of that. And I was really turned off by the whole over-sexualization and the emphasis on, this huge busted bimbo bouncing around the console, and that was my overriding impression for like the first few years after Tomb Raider came out. And then in 1999, we happened to have the telly on, and an advertisement came on for Tomb Raider 4, The Last Revelation. And my mum just made this offhand remark about, oh, that looks like fun. So my dad and I got that for the PC for a bit of a joke Christmas present because, of course, it came out late 1999, and we thought, well, you've made a note to this, and it sounds like fun, so yeah, we'll just do that.
That's cool.
Well, yeah, the rest is really history because we loaded it onto the computer, and the first memory that I have is, of course, that incredible menu sequence where it's doing this flyby through all of these. Oh, God, they were like the tombs. There's real world places, the inside of mosques, the inside of tombs and pyramids and stuff. And of course, you had this gorgeous cinematic but really emotional, melancholic Egyptian style theme music playing in the background. And I was like, whoa, that's not what I was expecting. Okay.
This was supposed to be a joke.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. This was meant to be, some kind of, no offense to teenage boys, but a teenage boy's wet dream that was not going to be of actual interest. It wouldn't be interesting. It wouldn't be challenging. It wouldn't be intellectual or anything like that. And Lara Croft would just be pouting at the screen and making silly remarks the whole time. Well, of course, new game. Whoa, hang on a minute. Lara Croft's a lot younger than I thought she was. And, oh, okay, right, this is her very first outing. And she's got a mentor who is trying to be, all superior and smug and I know everything and you just tag along with me and you'll learn. But instead of just being an empty-headed bimbo, this Lara Croft person has got brains and she's got sass and she's got interest in everything and she gives back as good as she gets as far as the banter is concerned. I was astonished at seeing this completely different vision of this character and this game, and as I played it I realized, good God, this is hard. This is challenging. It took me ages to get used to the controls and the camera. As with everything, once you get used to it, you're fine. But I remember getting to the end of Cambodia, seeing Von Croy get trapped in the Iris room. Gosh, I really saw him getting a comeuppance coming from a mile away. But, that was really well done. And then suddenly there's this gorgeous FMV in the desert, the camels, and suddenly, that she's falling into this crazy ass cavernous tomb.
I can hear the music as you're narrating this. I can hear that.
Yeah, yeah. And it just blew me away, and I just got completely and utterly hooked. Poor mom didn't get a word in edgeways.
Oh no.
This was meant to be her present, but I kind of...
Did she ever play it?
No, but she watched me play it for a little while, and
Oh, that's lovely.
that's about as far as it went. Last Revelation was like, should for me personally have really been called like the first revelation, the massive revelation. There was no trace of the marketed, empty-headed, teenager-pleasing bimbo anywhere in any of this.
No, definitely not.
So I was blown away by that, and the more I played it, the more I wanted to learn more about her adventures. So as soon as I finished Last Revelation, and that took quite a while, even with, I had to go and get the walkthrough at this, because this was like pre-forums,
Oh, goodness me, it's such a big game.
But I loved it so much, and I just had to have more of this. I wanted to know more about the character. I needed to know more about her previous adventures and what was coming next. It's like a compulsion. And
Yes.
The idea that she finished the game locked in a pyramid, we don't know if she's alive or dead, it was like, you can't end it there. You cannot end it there. Come on. So I immediately got inspired to wonder what had happened to it after that. And I went because at that point, of course, no Steam, no downloading games or patches or anything like that. So I went to my local video game store, and I got like the sold out versions of the first 3 games.
Oh, wonderful, yeah.
And basically just played through them straight off. The first one really surprised me because, of course, by the Last Revelation, she's got all of these new moves and everything. And it was like, whoa, this is actually a lot easier than the one I was just come off the back of.
Simplistic.
But I was so taken by the story and the crazy locations and stuff. And back, of course, we were in Egypt, and it was so much fun. Tomb Raider 2, to this day, is the one I think actually I like the least for difficulty, because I got killed so many times. And I lost my way so many times. It was insanely hard compared to everything else. Even parts of the Last Revelation weren't this challenging. And I think most of that was the combat. Then, of course, Adventures of Lara Croft comes along, and I just fell in love with the variety of stuff there. I loved being able to go from one location to another and hop all over the place. Again, the difficulty level was very difficult to compare with Last Revelation, because technically the controls were a little bit more simplistic, but the difficulty of the backtracking and the platforming and the combat was super, super hard. So I had great fun working all that.
I found the London levels next to impossible when I was a child. Goodness me, some of them were mind-blowing in terms of level design. Is so difficult.
And that was my one failure with this. The levels that I liked the most in Tomb Raider 3, of course, were the more ancient ruins, naturalistic ones like India. London kind of put me off. I mean, I am not even going to mention a particular level's name. I think everybody can imagine it if I say scuba divers and crocodiles and an awful lot of doors and underwater maze type things. That level deserves to be its own curse word in the Tomb Raider community.
It totally does.
Everybody knows exactly which one I mean. But by this time, of course, Chronicles had come out, and I was so freaking excited, I can't tell you, to get that. I didn't get it on the day of release, but I did get the Angel of Darkness on the day of release, and that I can smell the interior of the DVD-ROM case. That slightly plasticky smell, or the kind of ink smell that you get with brand new books or magazines or anything like that. And seeing her in the denim and then the combats. I mean, to me, that is the pinnacle of Lara as she should be, and as she will, that's where she reached peak Croft for me.
Wonderful.
I know it had a whole bunch of hugely negative reviews, and a lot of people just flat out didn't play it purely for that reason. And I'm really sad about that, because it really deserved that attention. And of course, that further inspired me, because of course it takes place quite a significant chunk of time, several months at least, after the end of Last Revelation. So when she turns up in Von Croy's apartment at the start and is like, why am I here? Why are you bringing me here? And there was so much bitterness and conflict going on between the two of them. I loved that dynamic and I really wanted to know what was going on. And of course, because the game didn't provide an answer, I immediately just set about trying to figure one out. And by this point, I was lurking on forums, and lurking gradually became full membership, and full membership became a moderation, and just loads of collaborative projects with people. It was so, so good. It was a brilliant time to be a Tomb Raider fan.
Was this around the time when you started to write Tomb Raider fanfic as well?
Absolutely. Yeah,
that was when you sort of started to plan your Angel of Darkness novel?
At first, I wasn't going to be anywhere near as ambitious as that. I was always loving to write, and I've wrote tons of stuff that I've never published because even now I can just look back and say that is crap. But I've always loved to write. I've always loved to get into the heads of characters and to understand the structure of what actually makes a story tick. That's always been a passion of mine. So when that aching chasm of unexplained events in Tomb Raider came along, I had to fill it. It wasn't that would be a nice idea. No, I was almost compulsively, I have to find out what happened to her. And I really enjoyed being in first person for Lara. She's a great character to be in first person to because she keeps so much of her thoughts to herself and never ever displays those thoughts or those emotions to the outside world. It's like instantly set up conflict between the internal and the external. So she's like so good for that particular style of writing. I'd written a few shorter fanfics in third person, but the first one that really got it going was a novella that explored what happened to her after she escaped the pyramid. And when I got to the end of it, she gets the phone call from Von Croy begging her to come and help him. She doesn't say why, he doesn't say when or what the problem is, but he wheedles her into coming to Paris. So that for me was the very natural springboard into, I've got to novelize this. I can't just sit back and have that untold, because like the gap between Revelation and Angel of Darkness was so unfinished as a product. There are so many people who've talked about this in huge amounts of depth about its bugs and its glitches, and the fact that it was so unfinished, that there was so much material that was left on the cutting room floor. I mean, I am so grateful that one of the biggest blessings that Tomb Raider has brought into my life is my friendship with Murty Schofield, who is one of the most incredible human beings on the planet. Never mind a writer, never mind an animator. He's just a fantastic human being. And his vision...
Well, that's lovely.
Yeah, well, it's true. It's, you speak to him, you read his writings, you listen to him in live streams and podcasts. He is a human dynamo of ideas and inspiration. And what he laid out, what his vision was for Angel of Darkness, was 10 times bigger than what we saw actually in the game, which was a terrible, terrible thing.
Yeah, there was so much left out.
Oh, it was a travesty. In some ways, I think the fact that so many things were left out and so many plot points were not tied up, that was another reason to inspire me. I started collating all of the plot points that were missing and all of the other material that had been dropped that should have been in there. All the time, Lara from the novella is kind of sat on my shoulder like the proverbial, conscience, whispering, going, just do it, just write it. I really need you to tell my story here because, just listing it. Well, it was like, lots and lots of people, really dedicated fans, have spent years going through the beta files, going through the hidden files, like the sound, the audio, the animations and everything. And they've produced all this incredible wealth of material. And a lot of people have put this lot together and collated it on forums, on websites, and it's awesome. But for me, I had Lara herself wanting to tell it. She, it's a very cliched thing to have somebody who, it needed to be told as a story, not just as a sterile like shopping list. You show it, you unfold it, you create a narrative that that grows and becomes this organic process that has a life of its own. That's what really excites me about writing. And Lara is the best companion to have as a guide for these stories. So, and it just grown from there. I mean, I still have so many things that I want to write. But this is a testament to how much Tomb Raider continues to be an inspiration for me. You know, years now after I got into that, it's 21 years this year. My personal Tomb Raider story started in 1999, and I really haven't looked back since. Lara is just such an inspiring character, and it's very personal to me as well, because that was like less than a year since I had to drop out of school because of health problems. Pre then, I was a gymnast, I was running, I was climbing. I wasn't shooting dual pistols or fighting T-Rexes, but I was definitely...
Not for lack of trying.
Oh, God, you know, well, there's very few T-Rexes in Sherwood Forest, trust me, I've looked. But, you know, I don't care how bad things get for me physically. I can still, like, project some of that love and fondness through Lara, you know. And there's actually a few times in the novel where I didn't sort of bash people over the head with it, but I kind of inserted a little bit of my own feelings of that. Like when she gets to the Tomb of Ancients, she's going to be rusty. She's maybe even going to be a little bit afraid that she's going to screw it up because she's out of practice, but hell, just take a deep breath and do it. And when she gets to the bottom and, you know, she stumbles a bit, she's hot, she's sweaty, but she can look up. And for that moment, there is that rush of joy to have like, yeah, this is who I'm supposed to be. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. Hey, I'm back. That was a really, really powerful personal moment for me to write. I hope that other people have also been inspired by Lara and know that, yeah, you can have your own inner doubts and your own inner fears, but it's what you do that matters. And she has all of these insecurities. She has all these doubts. But then the core part of her that, you know, no pun intended, the core part of her, that the start of who she is and who she will always be, is always there. You know, you can go through all the crap. Underneath that is a strength that can keep you going. Yeah, Lara isn't just a bit of fun for me, and she's not just a source of inspiration for writing, but her attitude and the way that she faces these challenges in the games has so deeply helped me over the years.
This leads me quite nicely on to another question I wanted to ask you. And there's so much infighting in the community between people who they prefer one developer over another, or they love one game and they loathe others. There have been these rifts in the fan base for so many years now, and it just seems that as time goes on, these rifts widen and new ones form. So what do you think can be done to heal those divides?
That's a really good question. I think every single large franchise suffers from this problem. We've seen it in everything from Star Wars to Star Trek. Any franchise that starts off, gets a fan base, develops, they grow up, they have kids of their own, you know, and a new incarnation comes out, a new series comes out, a new vision. The same applies to Tomb Raider. And yeah, they all come under the same umbrella, but they are so distinctly different and so disconnected from each other that I don't think they can be reconciled by an outside force. I think the best thing that could happen to the franchise is for the developers to kind of just keep acknowledging that all of those eras are totally 100% valid, especially when it comes to the fandom and interactions with it, because Crystal Dynamics' community management has very much been focused on the new games. You know, each time one comes out, or the build-up to one coming out, you know, obviously that's their job. They're supposed to be, you know, pushing this new one. But most of the fan base doesn't just subscribe because they want to see the latest incarnation.
They want to celebrate the series.
Yeah, they want to know that the developers are honouring the legacy of the franchise and those fans' contribution to it. So maybe one of the ways to get around this, it's not a catch-all solution by no means, but maybe just a more universal acknowledgement of the franchise. You know, Crystal Dynamics obviously is an American company, Square Enix is Japanese, Core Design was UK-based. You know, this is a global franchise and always has been.
It's absolutely global, yeah.
It is literally going back to 1996, and all of that deserves attention. None of them are better than each other. they're just really, really different. The attitude shift, I think, is perhaps what would help if there was less competition between each incarnation and more recognizing what unifies them. That sort of thing might help a bit more.
That's a really, really great answer. Well, I have one more question for you before we dive into Egypt. If you were in control of the series, where would you love to send Lara?
Oh, God. That is a fantastic question, isn't it? To be honest, I would love to see more of the Middle East and Mesopotamian places.
Yes.
We've
Oh, that would be so exciting.
well, you see, this is where Angel of Darkness was going. The grand place was always going to be Cappadocia in Turkey, and these underground cities and everything. But you delve a little bit into that, and suddenly you get Zoroastrianism, the ancient cultures of Sumeria and Acadia and Babylon, the Epic of Gilgamesh.
There's some wonderful mythology involved in there.
Oh, it is magnificent. These cultures are some of the most ancient on Earth. And I think it would be criminal to neglect that. More South African places as well, sort of going into like Ethiopia, the Sudan, that kind of area. That's, for me, would be incredibly ripe areas for storytelling to mine. And I really hope to see Lara in those places at some point.
I think that has led us very nicely to our conversation about Egypt.
One of our favourite places.
Absolutely.
And it's way more than just pyramids and sand.
So Egypt has appeared in 3 games so far. We've got Tomb Raider 1, Last Revelation, and Anniversary. Today we're going to try and focus on some of the mythos of the Last Revelation, Horus and Set, and the amulet, and where Lara fits into everything. So right at the start, Lara is hunting for the amulet of Horus, and she finds it. She carelessly swipes it, and when it's time for her to investigate the artifact itself, she discovers she's made a monumental mistake.
Bit of a boo-boo.
A little bit of a boo-boo, yeah. We see the flashback of Horus imprisoning Set, and that's never really discussed properly in the game beyond Set is evil. So there is quite a story to be told.
Oh, God, yes.
Who were these gods, and what was their story in actual Egyptian mythology?
Probably best, actually, if we begin with why Set was such a cock in the first place. And I know you will get that reference because we've read the same book. Guys, if you haven't read this particular book of ancient Egyptian mythology, I'm sure Chris is going to put the link down in the description because let me tell you, it's a very good retelling of the Osiris, Set, Horus, Isis myth. Go read it,
I will
please.
absolutely put a link in the description.
But of course, before 21st century cartoonists got hold of this, a lot of people were talking about this myth prior in history. There was a Greek-Roman historian called Plutarch who famously travelled Egypt and basically gathered as much of the mythology as he possibly could and then wrote about it. When people talk about the myth of Osiris, Horus, Set, and Isis, most of the time they are thinking of the version that we get inherited via Plutarch. And in his version of it, Set, he is evil, but he's also very crafty and he's very intelligent.
It's an exciting but actually incredibly dark story.
Oh, yeah. If you love murder, betrayal, blood and guts everywhere, and lots of sex and violence, this is a great myth. Basically, Set is the brother of Osiris, and Osiris at the time is the king of the gods. He's the pharaoh. But of course, Set, who is Osiris's brother, is kind of jealous of this fact, and he really doesn't like Osiris. Some accounts have Osiris, I think, accidentally or maybe on purpose, kicking Set in the leg at one point. I don't know what, but either way, these two have got start out the myth with an enmity. They don't like each other. Osiris is actually quite a decent character and stuff, but Set takes everything personally and he holds grudges. So one night he conspires with loads of accomplices to kill Osiris, and he gathers all the gods together in a great big party and celebration, and he arrives with a massive jeweled box, beautiful inlaid woods, ebony, ivory, precious stones, and he says to everybody, okay, this gorgeous box will be the prize to whoever fits in it Now, all the gods and goddesses are very eager about this because, gold, shiny thing, gods need to say more.
Especially Bastet.
Especially that time. Yeah. Yeah. Why didn't he think about this a bit more carefully?
Get out, cat.
Yeah. This is why it wasn't made of cardboard, because otherwise you'd never have gotten her out of it. So he gets everybody to try it. But of course, he has taken Osiris's measurements secretly beforehand. So nobody will fit in it except Osiris, who is the last one to try it, and goes, "Hey, wonderful guy. This is fantastic. Thank you, brother. I fit perfectly. Yeah, well done. You win." Donk. Slams the lid down, locks Osiris in the box, gets his servants to solder it shut, and then proceeds to throw the box into the river. Nice move, Set. Now, most of the myths agree that this box then floats down the Nile until it comes to the Phoenician coast, and it gradually gets enveloped by the trunk of a growing tamarisk tree. Box disappears. Nobody knows where Osiris is. Isis, she goes
Yes.
nuts over Osiris's murder, and she sets out to find him. Set, meanwhile, takes over the throne. After quite a long, arduous journey with a lot of bits and pieces going off, Isis finds the tree, which by that point has been cut down, and the trunk of it has been made into a pillar, and she brings Osiris out of it. He's a little worse for wear, you could say. But before anything can happen, before they can escape, Set turns up, and in many versions of this myth, he then cuts Osiris into pieces, as you do.
Yikes.
In a fit of rage. Yeah, Set scatters these pieces all over Egypt so that Osiris can never, ever be made whole again and become pharaoh again. Isis, again, does not just sit around moping as most historical mythological women do. No, Isis is a badass, and she basically slaps Set across the nose, gets a bag, and walks all over the land of Egypt finding the pieces of Osiris. And this is why so many places in Egypt claim to actually be the tomb or burial site of Osiris. Oh, they might have had a foot or an elbow or a shoulder, or
it was like the ancient relics. You go to churches and cathedrals around the world these days, and you get this is one of Jesus's fingers, and there's like
that's it.
105. He had 105 fingers.
And 5 fingers. But, yeah. Well, this is we echo this part of the myth cycle in the Temple of Osiris. Actually, that I quite like that, because of course
about collecting the pieces.
Yeah, you get the pieces of the statue, and you put them back together, and boom, Osiris is whole again. I'm very, very glad that the makers of the Temple of Osiris made it like a PG version, because, of course, there is a piece missing in the Egyptian myth version that they most definitely would not want kids to be running along and collected. Oh, what's this next piece of the body that is surrounded by a blue glow and sparkling and flashes into light when I touch it and is reunited with the statue? Yeah, you guys probably know which bit I mean. Either way, Isis manages to get all the other pieces of Osiris's body together, minus that bit which she gets a bit of help from her sister Nephthys. And just because she is Set's wife does not make Nephthys evil. She is not. She's a really awesome goddess. And of course, she is also sister to Isis. So she helps Isis reconstruct his body. They get Anubis on the case, the awesome jackal-headed god of embalming and the dead, and he basically turns this dismembered body mess into the first mummy. So hooray, Osiris, you are the very first mummy. And they say a whole bunch of spells over it. Thoth, ibis-headed god of wisdom, he comes along, he helps with the whole magic thing, and boom, Osiris is alive again.
Hooray.
Sort of.
Oh.
Yeah, there is a big caveat with that. He cannot stay. Basically, he has become, because he's been dead, because he's gone through all of this, he's gone through the judgment of Ma'at, and he is now going to be the ruler of Duat, which is the ancient Egyptian underworld. And his job from now on is going to be to help judge all the departed souls that end up in the underworld, whether they go on to, his version of paradise or get fed to this giant crocodile hippo monster that we'll probably talk about in a while.
The Ammit.
But Osiris basically has, Ammit. Oh, she's nasty. And we do run into her, sort of, in Last Revelation, but again, we'll get to that. But meanwhile, Isis is like, you know what, one night with my formerly dead husband is enough. And Isis becomes pregnant with Horus. So in most accounts of this, Isis basically goes into hiding from Set. So she finds a thicket of papyrus and she gives birth to baby Horus. And actually, the papyrus thicket is a very, very powerful symbol in Egyptian mythology. When you look at tomb paintings or any kind of artwork, most scenes in Egyptian art don't actually include a background. But when they do, it's often a bed of papyrus reeds. And that's a very powerful symbol of like protection. And it feels like a safe haven, a hidden refuge. But the bit where we're really concerned as far as Tomb Raider goes is what comes afterwards, what was regarded as the contendings of Horus and Set. The contendings of Horus and Set basically detail Horus as a young man or young god trying to regain his rightful throne from Set. And this goes into a lot of detail. There's so much that happens. It's not a simple, they meet in front of the pyramids, have a big battle, and then the winner gets to be the ruler. Now, there is so much more going on.
There's some really nasty stuff.
Yeah, it gets pretty violent at some point. I mean, these competitions go crazy. They're everything from, okay, everybody turn into a hippopotamus and then eat the shit out of each other, right through to a boat race, So there is craziness in here. It's like,
there's slightly different contests happening.
But the thing is that Horus repeatedly defeats Set in these and is supported by most of the other gods. But the trouble is that all of these contendings actually drag on for over 80 years in real time, mostly because Atum, the creator god, basically favors Set. He says, you usurped Osiris. Technically, Horus is the nephew of Set. And so this kind of uncle usurps the throne and the nephew has to regain it is one of the oldest stories there is. I mean, we're talking about Horus and Set, but this is the same story that we get in Shakespeare's Hamlet and even like Disney's The Lion King. This is a very, very old version.
Yeah, it repeats throughout time.
Yeah, this is a very, very old story. And it's very interesting that no real reference to it is made in The Last Revelation. It's literally just Horus is good god and Set is bad god. And bad god gets locked in sarcophagus with shiny amulet, which Lara accidentally releases and then has to re-imprison him. But I don't think there was any actual direct reference to this myth in the game.
I don't think there was anything that talked about the relationship between the gods.
Going back to the competition, all sorts of craziness happens. At one point, Horus accidentally kills his own mother in a fit of rage. He's battling Set and Isis turns up and Horus, turns around and accidentally, on sort of enraged, lops her head off, as you do. So, yeah, this battle gets very, very heated and all sorts of other really even much more dark stuff happens, including actually something that is relevant to The Last Revelation, because in several versions of the myth, Set and Horus actually inflict pretty bad injuries on one of the other two, including Set gouging out one of Horus's eyes. Now, this is really, really important because Horus is primarily a sky deity. He is a god of the sun and of the heavens, and in many Egyptian symbols, the eyes are seen as things like the sun and the moon. So to destroy one of or more of his eyes is seen as basically a very bad thing as far as the heavens are concerned. In fact, some myths actually directly equate the destruction of the eye of Horus with the darkening of the moon. So during the monthly cycle of the moon or during eclipses, that they directly linked that symbology with the myth. Sometimes Horus gets the eye back when other gods heal him. But either way, by the end of the myth, Horus is whole again, and Set is also whole again, and they do reconcile. And this is an important thing because one of the huge cornerstones for the Egyptians was the concept of Mat, or Ma'at. And that is the principle of basically universal order, of everything and everyone having a specific place in the universe. a specific role and the obeying of laws, the obeying of justice. It's basically like universal truth.
Yes.
And Horus, to be a good pharaoh, you had to uphold the principle of Ma'at. And Horus eventually becomes like a symbol that Ma'at has restored.
I guess it's, again, symbolism as well, that Set, being a deity of chaos, has been sort of smoothed over and chaos has turned into order.
Yeah. It's kind of, we don't end the myth in any version with Set or Horus killing the other or destroying the other. They both reconcile, and that's a really important thing to the Egyptians. And in some ways, the other thing that doesn't get mentioned in the game is the importance of Set's non-evil traits. Originally, Set was just basically this fairly benign, or at least not malevolent, deity of the desert and of foreigners and the storms and everything, and of fertility. You know, he was a very, very important deity. But over the course of Egyptian history, where they get invaded by people like the Hyksos, suddenly you get a shift where foreigners stop being seen as just on the fringes of civilization to a threat. And suddenly Set, as part of that, becomes ever more demonized in myth and in legend. And, you know, you see that in the way that the pharaohs view him. I mean, a lot of pharaohs who take a Horus name, as it's called, when a pharaoh becomes pharaoh, they are given what's called 5 names, you know, titles, if you like, one of which is known as the Horus name. And that kind of reflects their legitimacy to rule. But once or twice, you do get a couple of pharaohs who actually choose Set instead.
Yeah.
And very occasionally, after all of, in the later periods, you get Set and Horus appearing together in the cartouche that bears the pharaoh's name. So that feeling of Set wasn't always just pure evil, and the presence of Set and Horus together was what was needed to confer the idea of Ma'at and universal truth and balance. So yeah, everybody needs a bit of chaos in their lives, I suppose, is the message there. But yeah, Set's mythology in Egyptian culture and his animosity with Horus, the details of their strife, just doesn't get any kind of real mention in the game. And I'm really sad about that, because I love this myth. It's way more detailed than what we've been able to discuss here today.
Yeah.
But it is so worth reading up on and reading and comparing the different versions of it. There's just so much more than we can actually go into here. Except to say that the amulet of Horus and the armor of Horus don't actually exist.
No, unfortunately.
There is no sarcophagus of Set that we know of. This is the thing, you know, for all we know, Set actually is in an undiscovered tomb somewhere. But the Valley of the Kings, where we actually supposedly do find it, has been pretty thoroughly explored. And so far, no gods, no rivers of blood, no apocalyptic curses. I'm going to hold off on actually on that last one now I'm thinking about it. But yeah, the actual amulet of Horus, the ankh shape with the beautiful red stone in the middle, no, that was definitely made up for the game.
That was absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much, Jenny, for joining us and for elaborating on these ancient tales.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
I would be honoured if you would come back and join us for a new episode, hopefully later this year, when I'm starting to plan Series 2. If everything goes well, then you would be most welcome to come back.
Oh, that would be fantastic. As you probably have gathered, I can rabbit on about this for an awful long time, way longer than is healthy. But yeah, I would love to come back, and I'm really, really pleased that you've asked me to come on here. It's been a joy. Thank you.
Pleasure was all mine. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us on this explorative journey into ancient Egyptian mythology. Follow along at Raidercast Pod on Twitter, and don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube video series so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Until next time.